Horror, to me, is absolutely the most interesting genre of media. A lot of the time, I absolutely hate what I'm seeing, but it's impossible to look away out of sheer intrigue. Then, on the other end of the spectrum, we have Roblox, the platform designed for little kids with 90% of games being low-effort, mindless cash grabs. I've talked about Roblox games before, I've talked about mobile horror games before, so why not try both at once? So today, I'm going to be taking a look at a good sample of different Roblox horror games, to see if any of these actually work as competent horror experiences. In other words, are they remotely scary? Or do they even do the bare minimum and function as fun games? Well, that's what we're finding out today, starting with one of the most well-known, The Mimic. Straight from the menu, you can tell that there's a good amount of effort here. With a nice looking parallax effect and whatever this hellspawn is, this is a chapter-based narrative game. And it takes itself surprisingly seriously for being made in Roblox, which is definitely a big breath of fresh air, as a lot of other games I played in the past were defended by fans as being joke games, in order to escape the criticism that the horror game isn't scary. The Mimic isn't the kind of game to be picked up and played for a few minutes at a time. It's very narrative driven, and follows stories divided into books, chapters, and parts. But from the random couple missions I joined, yeah, it's pretty solid. The first lobby I joined was for Jealousy Chapter 1, which starts with our main character heading towards an office. Something happened to the main character's brother. Wow, very sad. But then it cuts to us in a boat, where a giant guy comes out and hits us. Then we wake up in a Japanese house. I have literally no idea what's going on here, but I'm not all too interested in the lore anyways. What's the actual gameplay like? Well, it's pretty straightforward for a horror game, having to follow the directions in the spooky environments to progress forward, all the while having to avoid running into the various enemies strewn about. After arriving at the house, we look around and find a book containing some lore about two sisters, with one having cannibalized the other and growing a mouth on the back of her head, begging to eat. Surely we'll never have to see that in person. Oh shit. For this part of this chapter, the main enemy is this tall lady with no jaw and sunken eyes. And my god, she's as threatening as she's annoying, which is to say, a lot. If you're spotted at all, she can easily outrun and kill you, forcing you to be extra stealthy as you traverse a house consisting mainly of long, open hallways, looking in rooms for rats to poison. You can close doors, but that's assuming you've been careful not to get caught. Finding an item in a spooky area is a pretty typical horror game cliche, but I will say the more original aesthetic here really makes things stand out. With that in mind, it still didn't stop me from giving up, cause man, this sucked. What was I even supposed to do there? The other one I played was Jealousy Chapter 2, and despite being a direct follow-up to Chapter 1, because I skipped everything after the first part, I had no idea what was going on. So here we're on an island populated by the giant people from before. The creativity really shines here. Seeing the silhouettes of the giants surrounding the area is a super neat visual, although the gameplay is basically just walking forward stealthily. Once we get inside, we can open big door. Then we get a good look at the inside of their oversized house. Sneaking around the giants was another really cool scenario. Again, can't comment on the story, but from what I'm playing, it's enjoyable. While I'd say this game was pretty well polished, I did notice some pretty glaring glitches in terms of the NPCs. The tall lady attacked me through a wall, and later on, a giant randomly started T-posing in place. But overall, this was definitely a promising start to this video. Certifiably not a heinous Roblox game. It doesn't seem to fall into the common pitfall of Roblox horror, that being the scuffed suspension of disbelief. A lot of the time, it could be really hard to imagine that you're really there because of the default Roblox character models. But with a more detailed style and first-person perspective, this game nearly sidesteps its faults completely. All it needs is a little more polishing up as more chapters are added. I think this game shows what ideal Roblox horror looks like. A game that's surprisingly long and with actual serious attempt at making something solid. Not bad, but let's see what we're following it up with. Oh. So next we have Mr. Crazy's Carnival.
Scary obby.
This is obviously not a direct horror game like the last one, but instead, a horror-themed obby. Obbies are pretty much the quintessential Roblox game experience. Of course, right next to tycoons. So it only makes sense that someone would combine it with the horror genre to make this. Right away, we get the option between baby mode and gamer mode. Starting the game leads to this animation. I sure hope he can get to a hospital soon, because his bones are not recovering from that. Straight away, we're greeted with a giant clown head. A little narcissistic, but we'll move on. The first obstacle we have to deal with is, oh no, Mr. Crazy! And he's crawling upside down at us. One death caused by looking backwards later, and we made it. Something to note is whatever this conversation is.
Alright, I'ma go play with my cat.
Discord kitten? Nah.
Nah,
Yeah.
my cat playing right now.
Nah.
With mobile, it is so pro. Its name is Drix Cat.
So next we have to walk around bear traps while avoiding mines, followed by walking a thin line of flags. Much like everything else in this game, it's only a standard obby but with some horror elements sprinkled in. But things only get weirder as we continue. Next, there's more standard platforming, then a reference to a meme from 2018, then swimming and finding a button. After a few more boring levels, we got something somewhat interesting. We have to stack objects to get to a Ferris wheel. But honestly, it sounds more interesting than it really is to play. There's not a single enemy in this area, and with no risk, the whole thing just feels like a waste of time. After a Ferris wheel ride, more platforming, more filler, and more platforming, finally, something horror-focused in this horror-themed obby. Here we have to navigate a tight sewer system while avoiding zombie clowns. More typical obby levels later, we get another chase. This time we're running away from a
Big, scary zombie clown.
We need to follow these footsteps, then we make it to the grand finale, fighting against a number of giant clowns. Once killed, the wall falls and we can make our way to the end, with some pretty typical rewards like a speed and jump boost, as well as a giant statue of me! And I thought the clown was narcissistic. Well, I guess the clown statue is bigger. I think it's fair to assume that this and all other easy Roblox obbies were designed for little kids, so it makes sense that they didn't want to go super crazy with the horror elements, which, yeah, is understandable. Overall, forgettable but forgivable, I guess. Here we have a particularly popular one. Doors. Now right away, I want to make myself clear that Doors isn't a bad game. The only reason I'm covering it is due to the sheer amount of people that would be asking me about it if I didn't at least mention it. As for the game itself, yeah, it's pretty solid. I'm sure we're all well aware of this game by now. While it isn't the most serious game here, it doesn't treat itself like a complete joke, being very fitting as a Roblox horror game. Something I specifically want to point out is how refined the movement is. Usually crawling is a slow, tedious mess, but here, everything feels reasonably paced. Something I really don't see this game being praised for as much. A lot like more arcade-styled games like Run, the rooms start short and simple, but quickly increase in length and complexity, with more and more enemies to deal with. It was inspired by Spooky's Jumpscare Mansion and another Roblox game, Rooms. And you could definitely tell. The main thing that gives the game its flavor are the different creative enemies. The highlights for me are Figure and Seek. Seek is a big Cyclops guy that has sections where he chases you down, and Figure is a blind thing that goes after you if you make too much noise. While the Roblox character models usually look out of place in a horror game, the simplistic art style the game goes for really works for it, with enemies like Rush and Ambush being PNG images similar to the next bot trend from a while ago. This game really likes turning off the lights. Every once in a while, you're forced into a dark cellar, and you have to flip a switch to open a door. These areas are really dark, but thankfully, if you don't have a light source, the game has a helpful entity, called Guiding Light, to point you in the right direction. Rush and Ambush also destroy all nearby light sources, so finding a lighter or flashlight is really important, especially since there's no outside light, cause we are in the void. I think they appear just often enough for it to not be a major issue, but playing in the dark still isn't really fun. Overall, Doors is a simple yet effective horror game that I had a decent amount of fun in. I recommend playing it with someone who's more familiar with the game. Even though it does tell you how to deal with the enemies after dying to them, it's a lot more natural to have a friend explain them to you as you go along. But yeah, solid, polished game. Although I wasn't exactly shitting my pants in fear. Originally, I was planning to cover The Scary Elevator 2. Judging by the title, you might expect it to be a sequel to another game, The Scary Elevator, but this was actually made by a completely different developer. My interest was destroyed as soon as I realized that the random events were just trying to be funny and not horror related. The original game it is. Now, The Scary Elevator is very similar to other elevator games, like the normal elevator. Basically, you and the rest of the server are on an elevator, which summons a random horror related room, where a killer appears to attack and kill as many people as possible. Then, if you survive, you get some coins. There are also coins found around the maps, and escape hatches on certain levels, which give you extra money. For some easy levels, it's actually possible to escape and re-enter multiple times, really raking in the dough. This can be spent on numerous items, including weapons, cause yeah, if you and some other players get together, you can actually kill the killers. Some weapons also offer stat boosts, like slightly faster running speed, which are definitely worth having. The rooms and killers are pretty highly varied, from the back rooms to Ben Drowned to Freddy Krueger to the imposter from Among Us. But while the variety is nice, it really is the same thing every time. While similar survival games like Natural Disaster Survival have a variety of destructible maps and different natural disasters, this one just doesn't have the variety needed to be consistently interesting. Just like Mr. Crazy's Carnival, this one was definitely directed at younger kids, so I understand the lack of horror here. It's still better than the fake sequel though, so now I'll be playing Don't Get Sniffed. This game actually follows a very similar gameplay formula to another game I've played, but not on this channel, Cheese Escape Horror. I actually played this game for Sournail's first Unscary Roblox Games video. And this game, well, it's like the last one, but with no cheese. I know, it's a horrible betrayal, but we have to keep moving forward during these trying times. Instead of being in the big scary cheese maze with the big scary 12-foot tall cheese rat, instead, we're being chased by a nose guy. It's very scary. We start the game in a small safe zone with 3 entrances to the maze. Right away, we can see a counter to collect boogers. Tuning into the TV, we get some much needed lore. So some guy got Botox nose surgery and became a massive nose obsessed with sniffing people. Once we enter the maze, it's time to start looking for boogers. And this guy. He doesn't do anything, by the way, he's just kinda here. Whenever you happen to die, you lose all the items in your inventory, but thankfully, your progress in the booger department remains. Oh boy, I was really worried about that one. When the nose gets close by, the screen starts to go red, and a heartbeat sound can be heard in the background, giving you a warning before it's even visible. The nose is slow enough that it gives you a fair chance to run away, but it's still ever so slightly faster than you. It manages to stay as a consistent threat throughout the game, with it appearing near you every once in a while, forcing you to hide. Crouching has a bit of a delay and forces the player to time when they hit the button, but it was only ever a slight annoyance. The nose can also sneeze on you, which is kinda yucky. Progress works by getting a specific item to a specific part of the map. The map size is pretty reasonable for the most part, and over time you can begin to remember landmarks, like this vent, the red door, and the purple door. Sometimes you can go through these door portals and get items for progress. Being a Roblox game, it isn't perfect, of course. The nose got stuck in front of an exit, and everyone had to wait for a while. But that was the only glaring issue here. After getting all 14 boogers and using C4 to blow up a wall, we're able to open a door and get a screwdriver to open a vent. Inside, there's this yellow key, and I couldn't find the tiny yellow door before dying, losing all my items. Quitting out of frustration, I never did get to see the resolution to this game. But you guys can. So the yellow key goes to a small opening where a button is pressed with a timer, and if you run fast enough, you can make it to the portal in time, but oh no! Then the nose goes through the portal, chapter 2 coming soon. Overall, this game is fine. I guess it was good enough to keep me playing for about half an hour, which is something. It clearly isn't trying too hard to be scary, with a silly big nose man with eyes as the antagonist. It's not crazy original. Again, Cheese Escape Horror is pretty much the same thing, but for what it is, it's at least entertaining. Now it's time for a slightly more polished game. Google help.
Apeirophobia.
So remember what I said about doors? That the only reason I was covering it was because of popular demand? Well, this isn't that.
Apeirophobia.
It's just a boring, poorly designed game. First of all, before even getting into the gameplay, the game ran horrendously. I don't know if it's the bloom, camera movement, or the fact I was recording it, but the game only ran somewhat consistently when the graphics were completely lowered. Something I didn't have to deal with for every other game here on my high-end gaming PC. Getting into the game, it starts with a faithful recreation of the beginning of Kane Pixel's original Backrooms video. Then we get into the first layer, based off of the original image from the 4chan post, or the one from the Kane Pixels videos. Something this game does that really annoys me is the stamina system. In a game about running through seemingly infinite empty areas, you might expect running to be a no-brainer, but there isn't a traditional stamina bar here. But instead, the game lets you run as much as you want, until you can't. Fellas, have you ever been so tired from running that you go temporarily blind? Because personally, I can't relate. The immediate goal is to get to a vent in the wall to escape, all the while trying to avoid these murderous stick figures. To get there we have to follow these arrows, cause nothing's more fun than following arrows in a completely empty area. Of course, except for these guys. I will point out that the backrooms really aren't a great concept to work with for a video game, so going for this approach is definitely an option, I guess. After making our way out, we need to walk in a straight line before entering a form of the pool rooms. Here we need to turn a number of valves to unlock a door. The enemy this time is a big monster starfish. After running around in circles for several minutes, we unlock the door and make our way to another house. And oh boy, things look like they're finally getting interesting. Here we get a glimpse of my favorite liminal space. I swear I've seen this in a dream once, and it feels like we're actually making some sort of progress. Oh, this looks like a pretty big jump. I can make that. Ah! Waking up in Cabinet Land, we get to see the absolute greatest enemy in this game, known as Hound on the wiki. And this guy is very goofy. He clips through walls and players constantly, and you're pretty much immortal if you have half a brain and just stay crouching. The goal here is to find 3 keys to open a gate, all the while playing around the monster. Then, after doing that, we have to find a number of buttons to open another door to escape. While every layer of the backrooms is visually different, the gameplay pretty much stays the same. Make it to an area, and either run to the next one, or find a number of something to get to the next one. After hitting all the buttons and going through a door, and going downstairs, we're in the pool rooms, where, you'll never guess, we need to run to a door, this time with no monster. After that, we're in a cave with a monster. This one shapeshifts as your teammates, and it's actually a pretty cool concept. But at this point, I ran out of lives, and I'm done. Looking at some gameplay, it seems the game gets more interesting over time, after getting through a really tedious counting puzzle. But without experiencing the whole game myself, the weak introduction killed it for me. But the biggest reason I don't like this game isn't just because of the monotonous, boring, tiresome, repetitive gameplay. Oh wait, maybe it is. But also because of the degradation of the backrooms as a whole. Maybe this is a bit of a hot take, but I don't believe the backrooms can ever actually work as an interactive video game. Back when they first got popular, the horror of liminal spaces wasn't that there were monsters running around to kill you, it was that there wasn't. It was the horror of waking up in an unfamiliar environment, with no way to ever get back. The original post was so interesting as an image, because that picture provoked ideas of immense isolation, as well as raising the possibilities of what you'd do in that situation. I actually made an entire video talking about the different mediums of horror. Next we got Dog. So first impressions, after this glorious title screen, this game is clearly a more money-hungry rip-off version of Piggy, with a bunch of stuff popping up. Hey, did you know that you can spend real money to get coins or have a higher chance to be Dog? Well, you're never gonna be able to close this, so you'll be getting very familiar with it. Yeah, so this is just a Piggy ripoff. Piggy is one of the more popular games on Roblox, being the most successful horror game, if you want to call it that. So it only makes sense that there's a number of games trying to take advantage of its popularity. But the thing that makes this game in particular stand out is its very familiar characters. The cast rest of the Talking Tom series. I'm really not sure how much of a joke this game is. The killer keeps repeating the word Ben over and over again, even when the killer isn't Ben, but the game is also really focused on making money and clearly had some amount of effort put into developing it or designing the maps. A lot of people like to call Piggy a joke game, but what I've never understood is that it's way more popular and well-known than the games it's trying to satirize, which is the granny style game. You can call it a joke all you want, but the only ones laughing here are the developers, their pockets lined with money. And Piggy still takes itself decently seriously with the lore, with a good number of people, children, being genuinely invested in these characters. So joke or not, Dog isn't just unscary, but is also easy as hell. The map design is a lot more linear than Piggy's, and I'm not sure if that makes the maps better or worse. Take Benji's house for example. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention all the names are switched around. In the original game, beating house on your own is fairly straightforward. Go around the house getting the appropriate items to open the door. The wrench, passcode, and white key. To do this, you have to run all around the house, following a ton of different branching paths throughout the basement, backyard, and upstairs. Now let's compare it to the one from Dog. While the layout is vaguely similar, the house loses a lot of its verticality, which makes figuring out what to do next a lot more straightforward. But if you think the average Piggy player is a bit incompetent, my god, the Dog players are a whole different breed.
Okay, why is she going there again? I don't understand. Piggy are weird. The hammer's right there, you go get it. She left the game!
Bruh. But hey, even though the level's a lot more simple, I will say there at least isn't a giant vent where it's impossible to get players without a specific trap. Much like Piggy, Dog also has a storyline. I just don't care enough to figure it out. But the cutscenes just look like worse versions of the ones from Piggy. Unlike the books in Piggy, which have 12 chapters, Dog is split into 8 parts. However, the majority of the levels have a parallel with one found in Piggy Book 1. The houses, lab, campsite, carnival, and prison. The other map I played was Campsite. Once again, it's a lot more simplistic than its Piggy counterpart, with everything circling around the same path. I was actually able to beat it first try. And again, whether the level design is better or worse, I don't really know, since the Piggy Book 1 maps are definitely rough around the edges. I will say, they're definitely a lot more beginner friendly. The key locations are always in the same place, with no random variation, though I'd imagine that this game would get boring very quickly because of that. It's also somehow less scary than Piggy, which is something I never thought I'd be saying. Ever. Overall, I have mixed opinions on Dog. I'd be lying if I said I didn't have any fun with it, but if I wasn't playing with a friend, I know for sure I wouldn't be able to say the same. Play it with the homies though, and you'll probably have a good time. Here's Escape Papa Pizza's Pizzeria. Scary Obby. Despite being named in a very similar way, this game is completely unrelated to Mr. Crazy's Carnival, Scary Obby, just following the same general game design of uninspired Obby. We wake up in the titular pizzeria, and make our way down to the depths beneath. There, we immediately see that the pepperoni on the pizzas are made of human flesh! And bone too. Making our way past some familiar looking oversized bear traps, I wonder if they shop at the same store. We now have to follow some pizzas as we escape Papa Pizza. Again, we've seen this before. After more generic obby stuff, we have to dodge some spiderwebs and not get impaled on these traps. Would I like to buy myself? Who's selling? Making more progress, there's another escaping section. And just now, I realized that this game, and probably the other one too, are reskins of another game, Siren Cop's Prison, which I played in my last Roblox game video. But even then, I'm sure that wasn't the first game to use this exact formula. Then I had a rave with some skeletons. Once the party ended, more platforming ensued, leading to the grand finale of running through a forest outside the pizzeria. No! Wow, now this game is pretty mid. It's about the same as last time, even having the same rewards for completion. Who would have guessed that lazy Roblox devs reusing formulas don't exactly create the best games? Everything I said about Mr. Crazy's Carnival applies here, except I'd argue that it was at least more interesting with the finale and the object stacking. Moving on. This is the Rake Remastered. Based on the creepypasta character, this game follows a group of people in an isolated, snowy, wooded landscape, vibing in the day and surviving at night. Unfortunately for us, however, that's when the evil, scary Rake appears. In the daytime, you get the opportunity to get things from a shop, and from supply drops. They have a number of different items with varying levels of helpfulness. Like the clock, which tells you when it's about to be nighttime. Very important, as you get literally no warnings in advance. Daytime is also when you want to get an idea of your surroundings, the main locations, and what might be safe. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Guess That House! The game's pretty simple. There's an option between 2 houses to stay, and it's your job to guess which of the 2 Terror YT stayed at. Is it A, the small bunker house with a closable door and a built-in security guard? Or is it this open shed thing, which also has a guard of its own? It's just kinda dead though. Well, it's time to make your decision. I chose to stay outside. Once night comes around, the Rake starts to hunt for players. And while it's possible to stun the Rake if you buy a stun stick, players with no items are pretty much screwed. The monster's design is pretty good, its glowing eyes being a menacing sight to see in the darkness. Something I found a bit annoying though, was that when I respawned after a death, the Rake would immediately kill me again. And while that may be a victim of circumstance, the Rake happening to kill me right next to the spawn point, it would probably be better to either have a safe spawn room, give players invincibility, or put them in a spectator mode till the next day. Something to keep in mind is the number of locations. This little bunker with a door is obviously going to be more viable than the more open buildings, or even worse, being out in the open. It's also probably best to stick with other players. That way you can gang up on him like Jason from Friday the 13th the game, or just to sacrifice someone as you escape yourself. But in all likelihood, if you see him, you're pretty much dead as soon as your stamina goes down. And while there are other Rake games, like, this one, there's nothing better than the remaster. With that being said though, there's no sort of grander gameplay. Just the same repeating cycle of day and night over and over again, with no long-term progress besides getting more items. Overall, a surface level game with good execution. I just wish there was something more substantial here. The last game I'll be covering is Rainbow Friends. Oh boy. Mascot horror is something that's been pretty popular these last few years, and if you're anything like me, you're completely sick of it. I am so tired of hearing about Poppy Playtime and Garden of Banban. I'm not gonna play them, so I don't care, Twitter. Released between Poppy Playtime and Banban, Rainbow Friends was released in 2022, and was met with mostly positive reception, albeit with some notable pushback. So what makes Rainbow Friends better than all the other mascot horror games? Well, you pick up blocks. So the lore of this game is that you're on a class trip, and we're going to an amusement park called Oddworld. Oh boy, I sure am excited for that. But oh no! Someone switched the sign around. So the bus pulls up to the crossway and sees a Ferris wheel on the left, and a sketchy dirt road going downhill on the right. So the bus crashes. Then we're asked for help by a mysterious figure. Apparently, he dropped his letter blocks, and they ended up going literally everywhere. But don't worry, he'll definitely let us out after this. But wait, there's also a big blue man. He may be big, but he's also slow and really dumb. For some reason, we're given a box to hide in at the press of a button, removing every element of challenge so long as he doesn't see you beforehand. The enemies have zero reasoning either.
Why is there a moving box right in front of me? Oh well, it's probably nothing.
You can also hide in other places around the map, but there's no reason for these to be here, since there's literally a hiding spot in your inventory. The servers in this game allow for up to 15 players, which somehow manages to make the game even easier. After getting all the blocks, it's time for the next night, and we get to see a lanky green guy. Ooh. I just want to point out how much I hate this character. Even though we're told he's a blind character, let's take a look at his character design and compare it to other characters with the same gimmick. Even characters from games we've already seen. The thing all these monsters have in common is that they don't have functioning eyes. You can argue that they're just googly eyes, but wouldn't that make all of them blind? Actually, it wouldn't be that surprising. And again, this character still isn't a threat. All you have to do is not let him run straight into you, and you're perfectly fine. And after finding 15 bags of snacks, it's time for night 3, and the new monster, Orange. This little man follows a trail, and if he catches you, you die. So then you find fuses, then the power goes out, then you find batteries, then it's time for a party. Remember when the mystery man said he'd let us out? So the party comes along, and yeah, this is a pretty anticlimactic ending. We need to run away from Blue as he chases us around for a bit. The other colors don't make any appearance here, and Blue doesn't even have a chance to catch us, since we already run faster than he does. Also, this section happened in Poppy Playtime. Blue gets trapped in a vent, and all is well. Also, Chapter 2 exists, but I really don't feel like playing through it. Overall, the most memorable part of this game is the fact that YouTube kids decided to steal it and use it for goofy little videos. Seriously, what the hell is this? But as for the game itself, there's a wall in one section of the map that just doesn't have collision, so you can see the entire foundation of the game. But yeah, there was nothing else there that was very memorable. We've seen these sorts of characters both before and after in the other games I've mentioned earlier. It at least made an attempt to be frightening, succeeding a little more when the lights went out, but it mostly just fell flat. From what I played, Chapter 2 has the same gameplay, so the hope for any substantial improvement is minimal. And that's every game we're covering. I think generally they aren't great or even good horror games, but as a one-time thing, these were actually pretty fun. The thing that makes Roblox horror games interesting is the way they have to toe the line between horror and children's entertainment, since the majority of Roblox's player base consists of children and preteens. Because of this, games have to be scary without relying on blood and gore or disturbing imagery, which undoubtedly make crafting a world of horror all the more challenging. But yeah, oh well, that's it for Roblox. Bye!